Renting a nice and cozy Airbnb might sound fun until you run into some ungodly monster living in the basement. The recent horror movie Barbarian plays around this idea and makes sure that those watching the movie will think twice before stepping into an unknown property in the middle of nowhere. In this video, we will break down the whole movie and bring you the story, while also exploring the haunting origins of the creature in the basement, the mother. There will be a few spoilers going ahead, so you have been warned. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a whole lot. So thank you, and let's begin.
It can soon become a pleasurable...
Breaking down the plot of Barbarian, 2022. The director Zach Kreger wastes no time in setting up an eerie ambiance from the very first scene. A young woman named Tess pulls up in front of a property, and it seems to be a rather gloomy and dark neighborhood. It is a rainy night, and Tess fumbles through her phone, revealing some details about the Airbnb property in Detroit that she seems to have rented. Tess parks her car right in front of the house and tries to use the lock code sent to her phone to open the key box. The code eventually works, but she finds out that there is no key inside. She is further surprised when she realizes that there is somebody inside the home, and she proceeds to knock on the door to try to get a response. A young man by the name of Keith opens the door, and he seems to be just as surprised as Tess when he hears about a reservation in the property the same night as his. There has been some kind of goof up with the reservation process, and it turns out that they both have been booked for the same night. There is no one to pick up the calls to resolve the issue this late in the evening, and Tess has no choice but to step inside to probe further into the matter. Naturally, she is somewhat hesitant as a young woman in the middle of nowhere. She is apprehensive about Keith, and rightfully so, because even as viewers you feel the nerves in this weird situation. The young man seems to be quite polite and compassionate as he readily welcomes Tess to spend some time inside until she can book another place for the evening. However, even his friendly gestures come across as red flags, and you keep wondering when the mask will snap and he will reveal himself to be some sort of psycho. Tess feels the jitters as well, but she really has no other choice except for waiting inside in this shady neighborhood. As luck would have it, the properties that she calls up are all booked. Keith tells her about a medical convention in town that might have led to all the hotels and Airbnbs being booked for the night. He is even gracious enough to offer her the only bedroom in the house, and he is willing to sleep on the couch to make her more comfortable. Slowly, Tess starts to overcome her hesitation, and later, we even see them having a conversation over wine. Tess tells Keith about her purpose of visit, which is a job interview for a position of a researcher working under a director. The director is not somebody famous, but Keith seems to know about her previous film, which comes as a pleasant surprise for Tess. She is further surprised to learn that Keith is well informed about the film and also about local music, which is supposed to be the subject of the director's next venture. Finally, it looks as if she has warmed up to the stranger and they call it a night. Tess gets so comfortable that she even forgets to lock the door, and she wakes up later in the night to some strange sounds. She is shocked to find her bedroom door half open, and from her bed she can see Keith making strange sounds in his sleep and almost wincing in pain. Dazed and confused, she walks up to him in an unnerving moment and wakes him up. Keith is just as shocked as Tess to be woken up in the middle of the night, and he denies ever having opened the bedroom door. Is it another major red flag? Well, probably not, because the next thing you know, Tess goes back to sleep and wakes up only the next morning. She finds out that Keith has already left for work, but he has left a note suggesting that they would meet again in the evening. The note also asks her to keep the keys in the lockbox outside just in case he comes back earlier than her. She heads in for her interview, which seems to have gone pretty well for her. However, the interviewer is shocked to hear about her locality in the Brightmoor. She seems surprised that there are even any Airbnbs around there and advises Tess to be extremely careful. By now, there are so many red flags that you are only waiting for the inevitable, for Tess to go down for her naivety. She comes back home, and this is where the first of many mishaps begin. Just as she gets out of her car, she watches a homeless man running towards her. She barely unboxes the key and gets inside the house when the man bangs on the door, asking her to vacate the house immediately. Tess is in a state of shock, and she manages to call 911 only to find out that all units are busy and there would be no help for quite some time now. She tries to calm herself down after ensuring that the doors are all bolted from the inside, but little does she know about the horrors that await her. While looking for some toilet paper in the house, she heads down into the basement, and Tess quickly realizes that there is something weird about this place. Pulling on a rope emerging from the walls of the basement, she ends up opening a secret door that leads to an elaborate network of underground tunnels. The room in the basement has a bed, a bucket, and a camera mounted on a tripod, and Tess seems to have the basic horror film knowledge to not walk into the dark underground tunnels. There are bloody handprints on the wall, and the whole place is just genuinely spooky. However, she finds herself in a pickle because she has accidentally locked herself in the basement. And this is the point where she starts to truly panic. Luckily for her, Keith arrives just in time, and she tells him about her troubles from the tiny window above the ground. We almost expect him to not react or to be happy about her captivity, but Keith disappoints one more time and actually helps her get out of there. When is he going to start showing his evil side? Introducing the mother, the real threat in the house. Once Tess is outside, she is determined to leave the house immediately. In retrospect, that is literally the smartest thing that she could have done. Keith, however, seems dismissive of her fears because he doesn't find anything wrong with a bed and a bucket and a basement along with a camera. Clearly, he hasn't watched too many horror flicks in his life, and he is going to pay a heavy price for his curiosity. He wants to check out the basement all by himself and promises Tess that he will be back in just a moment. Of course, he doesn't return, and Tess has to go looking for him. She is soon alarmed by cries of help from Keith in the subterranean tunnels in the basement, and this is when we are introduced to the actual threat inside the house. Tess watches in horror as a strangely deformed, naked humanoid figure emerges from the darkness and smashes Keith's head against the walls. The man everyone thought would be the villain dies instantly, and the narrative changes directions without letting us know what happens to Tess. The story jumps to an actor named AJ Gilbride, who is driving merrily in his fancy sports car. However, his life changes in a matter of minutes when he learns that his co-star from a television series has made allegations of sexual harassment against him. This gets him fired from the show, and his immediate future seems to be in jeopardy. From a life of luxury, AJ learns that his finances are going to run dry in a matter of months. The huge legal expenses and the time-consuming legal procedure mean that he will have to arrange for some extra funds immediately. As his world comes crashing down before him, AJ decides to sell off one of his properties in Detroit. When he finally ends up in Detroit, we see him heading to the same house where we just witnessed the terrifying subterranean monster killing Keith. Will AJ meet the same fate? Immediately upon his arrival, AJ notices that the house seems to be occupied by someone. There is luggage in the living room, and the bedroom sheets look as if someone had just slept in them. He is confused and calls up the rental agency, only to find out that their systems are rather flawed. They don't check up on the house after the tenant leaves, and the housekeeping services are only conducted before the guests check in. After the booking of the last guest lapsed, there haven't been any new ones, and hence, they never checked on the property. AJ is annoyed by such faulty services, but now he is on his own to figure out things. He tries to look for any trace of someone living in the house, but to no avail. That night he heads out to a party with one of his old friends in town, and their conversation reveals that there might have been some truth in the allegations made against him. He admits that the things that he did to the actress in question were not exactly consensual, but he still doesn't think that what he did was wrong. When he returns home at night, he is too drunk to probe further into who is living into the house and crashes in the bedroom. However, before passing out, he leaves a voicemail for the girl who had made the allegations against him, although his lawyer had strongly advised him against doing something like that. it is clearly established that AJ is not a very likable character, and you'll probably start hoping that the monster will get him next. The next morning, AJ finally ventures into the basement and inspects the large underground network. He carries a flashlight and a knife with him, but nothing jumps at him out of the darkness as you might expect. Nothing yet. He comes back from the basement and his first thoughts are if he can get some money for that space underground. He decides to measure the entire area to get an idea about the rough square footage down there, and he ventures into the subterranean tunnels once again. This time, however, he is not so lucky, and the monstrous figure living in the basement tunnels, referred to as the Mother, attacks him. He falls through a pit and ends up in a dark passage where we also find Tess. She is alive by some sorcery, and it is soon revealed how. As it turns out, the deformed creature actually has strong motherly instincts, and Tess has survived by playing to her tunes. She allows the mother to treat her as a baby and even drinks milk from a bottle when it is handed to her. Thankfully, she wasn't lactose intolerant, or it would have been a whole different horror story. She advises AJ to drink from the bottle and obey the command gestures made by the mother. However, AJ seems to be too dumb or too arrogant to make sense of the matter, and he refuses. He instantly pays the price because he is dragged away into a dingy room where the mother forcefully breastfeeds him. Basically, the deformed creature spends all its time watching videos of how to nurture a baby, and she simply abides by the instructions provided there. When a baby refuses to be bottle fed, it has to be breastfed. And we witness one of the most disgusting scenes in the movie where a helpless AJ is forced to suckle. However, this provides a crucial break for Tess as the attention of the mother is now focused on AJ. She manages to make a run for her freedom and manages to break out of the same window that she earlier climbed out of. The same homeless man who tried to stop her earlier helps her get out, and the creature watches from the window as she doesn't seem to emerge in the bright sunlight. It becomes clear that the homeless man whom she thought to be an assaulter was actually trying to help her in the first place. But you have to question his methods, because running aggressively towards a young woman and screaming at her is not exactly the best way to warn her about something dangerous. He instructs Tess to get away from the place as quickly as possible because come nightfall, the creature would emerge from its hiding and hunt her down. He also warns Tess about a deadlier entity in the house and tells her about the terrible consequences of lurking around the place. However, she is not too keen to run away leaving a man in danger, and she heads over to the nearest gas station. By now, she is a mess, with crumpled and torn clothes and dirt all over her face, but she still manages to call the cops for help. Unfortunately, the officers who arrive on the scene seem to be dismissive of her idea from the very beginning. The area is notoriously known for drug users, and they presume her to be one of the addicts simply wasting their time. She convinces them to accompany her into the house, but they refuse to break into someone's property without valid reasons. Well, maybe a woman claiming to be held hostage in the house is good enough reason to probe further. Meanwhile, the officers get another call about gunshots being fired nearby, and they leave Tess alone, dismissing her pleas and refusing to help whatsoever. The cops in this movie are indeed very strange. They either don't arrive at all, or they offer no help when they do. Time for a flashback to give some context. So far, the story has been roaring ahead, powered by a bizarre sequence of events, a lot of which do not make any sense. For instance, if AJ owned the house, how did someone just construct tunnels in the basement? Where did the deformed humanoid creature come from? The next scene takes us to a brief flashback that gives more clarity to the situation. We are introduced to an old man in the 1980s who is shopping at a departmental store. He gets things required for childbirth, such as latex gloves, wet wipes, and towels, and he states that he is getting all these things to prepare for a home birth. This man named Frank is evidently a twisted fellow, and more is revealed later in the movie. We get to know that this demented old man abducted several women and held them captive in the basement. He was the original owner of the house, and he forced himself on all the women he captured, none of whom ever managed to escape. He then established relations with the subsequent young women from the abducted ones, and what followed was a sick story of inbreeding. The mother is just a result of repeated inbreeding, and it is almost a mutant-like human form with barely any human consciousness. What happens to the mother? A nail-biting climax. Back in the present day, AJ is trying to run from the mother, and while rushing through the dark tunnels, he stumbles upon a chamber. The mother seems to be scared of the place, and when it runs away, you immediately start wondering what could be so terrifying for such a beastly creature. AJ enters the room to find a sickly old man, who is none other than Frank himself. The room is littered with empty liquor bottles, and the whole place is absolutely hellish. While scanning the room, AJ comes across the videotapes that capture the demented acts of Frank, and the old man retrieves a hidden pistol to shoot himself. AJ is shocked by the sequence of events, but he is smart enough to take the gun and make an attempt to escape the abnormality. Tess, on the other hand, takes matters into her own hands, and she rams the car into the mother when the creature comes to get her. While escaping through the tunnel, he is completely unaware that Tess is coming to rescue him, and he mistakenly shoots her, thinking her to be the mother. Fortunately, she is not seriously injured, and the two try to reach the tower at the end of the road, where the homeless man said he lived. However, the mother is still not dead, and it is in pursuit of the duo as they try to escape. Once they reach the lair of the homeless man, the latter comforts them, suggesting that the mother never comes this far out of the house. This homeless man named Andre tells them all about the history of the house, and they learn the origins of the mother and the old man living inside. Suddenly, in a shocking turn of events, the mother ambushes him from behind. Andre is helpless in front of her brute force, and she rips his arms out before killing him. AJ and Tess try to escape, but Tess has slowed down considerably because of her injuries, and they are soon cornered. As a last resort, they climb the tower, but the creature follows them to the top. Now they have reached a dead end, and there is nowhere to run. With the mother closing in, AJ shows us once again what a lowlife he truly is. He grabs an injured Tess and flings her off the tower, hoping the creature would jump after her, trying to protect her baby. He is right, because the animalistic motherly instincts in the creature make it jump right after Tess. We watch in shock as the laws of physics are defied completely. Somehow, even though the mother jumps after Tess, she somehow manages to cushion the fall for her. When AJ climbs down, he is surprised to find her alive and presumes that the creature is finally dead from the fall. The assumption proves to be a costly mistake, because the freakishly strong creature is still not dead, and it kills AJ in a matter of seconds. In a touching final moment, we see the creature trying to care for Tess in its own way. It doesn't realize that Tess is reaching for the pistol in the ground, and she puts a bullet in the creature's face to end its miseries for good. The last scene shows Tess limping out of this nightmarish neighborhood, putting the horrors of the evening behind her. You will finally get to breathe after holding your breath through the tense climatic moments, as it is finally a moderately happy ending. Everything about the creature, the mother. We have already discussed the origins of the creature and how it came into existence. However, there is more to the mother than being a product of repeated inbreeding. The creature looked like a deformed, mutated giant, and it had brutal physical strength. It could fight any average human in terms of strength, and we also saw how the creature endured a car crashing into it or falling from the high tower head first. It stood tall at around 7 feet, and the long arms and limbs almost resembled an ape. The facial appearance was barely human, and it had a few strands of hair hanging from its head. The creature is biologically a female, but there is literally not a single human feature in her. The director has stated in an interview that he studied a lot of victims who spent all their formative years locked away from the world. These features have been added to the creature, and it displays such animalistic behavior because it never got to step out of the basement and the tunnels. Even its misadventures at night were restricted to the neighborhood, and it suggests that sometimes she would abduct people in the neighborhood to nurse them as her babies. Her animalistic maternal instinct is almost moving, and it probably came from her losing her own babies back in the day. The only other human she ever interacted with was probably Frank, and that sick monster probably only tortured her and forced himself on her at every instant. This explains why the mother was fearful of the old man even though he could barely move in his sick state. The creature only expressed two extreme forms of behavior. It is either strong maternal love or disturbing violence, and Tess is lucky to have been treated with the former. To her credit, she played along and allowed the creature to nurture her just like it wanted. Technically, it was the mother who saved her from the fall, and we could see Tess hesitating to kill it because she understood that the creature was not exactly evil. In fact, the only reason she shot her was probably to put her out of her misery and to save herself because the creature would have certainly dragged her back into the house. Others, like AJ, Keith, and the homeless guy, were not so lucky, and one noticeable aspect about the creature is how it kills. The moves are almost feral and gory, and it was powerful enough to rip out an adult human hand. While the mother was freakishly strong and had incredible endurance, it was still vulnerable to a bullet wound straight to its head. This shows that there was no supernatural angle to her story, and she was simply a deformed human form. We have encountered numerous monsters and creatures in horror flicks, but this one will be etched into our memories for some time to come.
This process might seem overwhelming.
Marvelous verdict. Barbarian makes you jittery and genuinely creeped out. One of the first questions that you will have after watching the movie is about the actual identity of the titular Barbarian. Is it the mother? Is it AJ? Or is it Frank, the sick old man? While it may seem like the mother is the obvious monster, the actual sick freaks are the likes of Frank and AJ. They are the maggots of society that got weeded out through the narrative, which prompts us to consider the climax as a moderately happy ending. The storytelling is perfectly paced, and some parts of the movie bring back memories of the good old 80s slasher flicks. The narrative has enough tense moments, and some scenes are surely going to make your heart skip a beat. The acting performances deserve a special mention as well, and the likes of Justin Long and Bill Skarsgård prove their worth in gold. Now, the movie does have some major plot holes that also need to be discussed. The homeless man knew about the monstrous existence in the basement of the house, and yet he never once decided to inform the cops. He just tried to warn Tess once, and the moment she locked herself in the house, he just left the scene casually. Cops are unlikely to behave like that when a young woman clearly seems to be in trouble. And lastly, the fall from the watchtower scene was hilariously impossible. However, all these flaws are covered up by the thrilling narrative, which makes you think for the longest time that Keith is the one that is up to no good. The slow burning suspense ensures that the viewers will be glued to the screens the entire time, and this is certainly a movie worth watching. All in all, if you have a taste for a genuinely scary horror flick with a special build-up, this one will be right up your alley. So let us know in the comments below what your thoughts on the movie were. Tell us how you think the creature survived all these years without suitable nourishment, and share your opinions on the climax. Hey, if you liked our content, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. And in the meantime, have a good one and be safe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.